The anime in this video is from this season, so I'm counting on your hype and your likes so we can keep bringing its continuation here to the channel. Now let's get right into it. In this anime, everything is decided when you go to the church and discover what your class will be. The awakening ceremony for the village children is about to begin, and in this small village, everyone has incredibly high expectations for Errol, since his mother is a legendary S-rank swordswoman, and his father is an S-rank ring mage, so he was expected to be someone useful to society, since children inherit their parents' abilities. However, when the time comes for him to receive his class, instead of seeing visions of his professional title, all he sees is a white color. No, that doesn't mean he's racist, but anyway, when the priest discovers this, he's shocked, since it almost never happened. But in cases like this, it can only mean one thing: the priest announces that Errol has no class. He's someone who went unnoticed by God's selection. Classes are blessings granted to an individual, allowing you to specialize in a profession and gain abilities to improve yourself. So it's something very important that everyone has except Errol. He's different. After this terrible news, his parents and sisters spend the whole morning flattering Errol, thinking he'd become an adult film actor, just as Errol always dreamed. And yeah, his dream was awful, but they didn't expect him to end up unemployed. Still, they loved their son, and to support him during adulthood, they decided to cancel their retirement plans. They tell Errol that he can simply live off them for the rest of his life if he wants. Our hero here could have had an easy life, but he doesn't want that. He says he needs to become famous so he can get a girlfriend with a body like Mutwo's, which, let's be honest, is every man's dream, right? Everyone seems to think he'll become homeless since he has no class. But he doesn't let his lack of class affect his determination. Obviously, it would have been great to get a nice job that instantly made him strong, but he's been training with his mother for years, and the fact that she hasn't accidentally killed him with her divine God-given strength somehow keeps him motivated. Even if it takes more effort than usual to reach the same results as others, he's willing to keep trying. He wants to become strong enough to have his own monster girl coliseum, and his whole family is happy to see that he hasn't lost his willpower. Everyone starts praising him, saying he'll surely become famous in the future. Errol thanks them, but says he really needs to get back to training, so he heads out alone to the training grounds. There, he hears the sound of clashing swords. When he goes to check, he sees two kids in the middle of a duel, testing their swordsmanship skills. Soon, one of the boys notices Errol and asks what he's doing there, since he's just a classless guy hated by the gods. Errol says there are no rules against him coming there to train, but the kids don't want his presence around, so they say they'll be nice to him and show him what someone blessed with a divine class can do. The two start fighting in front of Errol, and he notices that their technique is terrible, but their strikes have a natural strength not earned through training. The first ability anyone in the swordsman class gets is called basic swordsmanship. It allows you to wield a piece of iron even if you've never held one in your life, which is clearly the case for these two. He thinks he could actually learn something by fighting them, so he interrupts their duel and says he'd like to challenge one of them. The kids get offended by the fact that a classless guy thinks he has any chance against them, but they agree to the fight anyway. Just to be sure, the first boy asks Errol if he has divine protection. Divine protection is a basic blessing that creates a shield around your body to absorb damage up to a certain point, and everyone in this world is born with it. Errol tells them that he does have divine protection, and the boys are relieved to hear that since now they don't have to worry about accidentally killing him during the duel. One of the boys steps forward and attacks Errol, expecting to dominate him with his opening strike. But to everyone's surprise, Errol defends himself with ease. No matter what the boy tries, he can't find a single flaw in Errol's technique to exploit. He signals for his friend to move in so they can attack together, but Errol sees it coming and jumps aside just in time. Mostly because the second kid was yelling during his sneak attack. The swordsman class may have given them decent sword skill, but it can't do anything against good old stupidity. These two couldn't come up with a decent battle plan even if their lives depended on it. Either way, Errol thinks it's a great opportunity to challenge himself by fighting both at once. So he charges at them, and within seconds, he knocks them both out. It wasn't nearly as hard as he thought it would. Any sensible person would have admitted defeat right there. But the boys insist they haven't lost yet because that hit didn't count. At that moment, a red-haired boy appears and tells them to stop whining, because in a real battlefield, there are no second chances. The redhead seems pretty well known, since the two don't even bother arguing with him. Approaching Errol, he says his swordsmanship is impressive for a classless bum like him, but the only reason he won is because he was fighting two weaklings. So now, the redhead wants to fight Errol to prove he's superior. The boys warn Errol that the redhead is the son of Captain Evans, the head of the village guard. Errol actually knows Evans. He used to stop by their house sometime to ask Errol's mom for help hunting demons. But honestly, this redhead doesn't resemble Evans at all. and Errol's tempted to call him adopted, though he decides not to make the guy any angrier than he already is. The kid's only doing this because he thinks his father's the strongest, even though everyone in the village says Errol's mom is stronger, which happens to be true, but the redhead just can't accept it. He insists he's not lazy like those other two. He awakened his sword skills a year ago and hasn't skipped a single day of training. So, even though he's still young, he's already reached an intermediate level of sword mastery. He believes a child inherits the strength of their parents, so he's here to prove once and for all that his father is the best by defeating Errol. But Errol calls him a liar because nothing he said makes sense. It's obvious the kid's just upset that Errol's mom can beat his dad, and wants to take it out on him. Still, Errol's always ready for a good challenge, so he accepts the duel and the two cross swords at incredible speed. The other two boys watch from the side, amazed that Errol can keep up with an intermediate swordsman like the redhead. After a few minutes of fighting, Errol realizes the kid is far stronger than the other two, but his anger is clouding his judgment. After a wide swing, the redhead leaves himself completely open, and Errol prepares to take advantage, but at the last second, the redhead activates one of his skills to counterattack. He's shocked that Errol managed to block a strike from such close range, though Errol still ends up taking the hit in the end, meaning the redhead wins. Errol asks for an explanation, and the redhead named Kufa tells him what just happened. He used a move called Twin Blade, a sword skill that lets the user strike twice in a single motion. He admits Errol's much better than he expected and respects him for that, but says there's no way a classless person like him could ever defend against a sword skill like that. However, Errol takes that as a personal challenge and vows to find a way to overcome it. A few days later, Errol's sister walks into his room to wake him up, but he's not much of a morning person, so he just ignores her and goes back to sleep. But when his sister Astia threatens to kiss him if he doesn't wake up, that's enough to get him out of bed immediately. The two go to the kitchen for breakfast, and Astia still tries to kiss him, but their mother doesn't seem to care, saying it's not really incest if there's no blood relation. However, in their case, they are half siblings, so yeah, that's definitely incest. After everyone finishes eating, Mila asks Errol if he plans to go to his special training again. He says yes, but she doesn't understand why he's been pushing himself so hard lately. She tells him he should take a break once in a while, but Errol has no plans to rest not until he becomes the best. So as soon as he finishes breakfast, he heads out to continue his training. Astia is starting to get really worried about him, since he's been coming home late every night ever since he got beaten up at the training grounds. But Farah is confident that Errol can take care of himself, so there's no reason to worry. She takes Astia to the back and shows her a chest full of broken swords. These are all the blades Errol's been using for training, and judging by how worn out they are, he's been putting in a lot of work. They both conclude that Errol's been training incredibly hard to get stronger, so they decide to just let him push himself as much as he wants. Meanwhile, in the forest, Errol is testing his new move against a tree, believing he's finally perfected. He had to let that damn blonde guy hit him over and over just to figure out how the technique worked, but he finally got it now. He can use twin blades freely. All this time, a goblin is watching Errol from the bushes, and even after seeing what Errol can do, the goblin decides to attack alone, using the same logic as my teammates when I'm playing Marvel Rivals. Errol spots the goblin and, unsurprisingly, slices the creature clean in half before its body even hits the ground. Just then, Errol hears a roar from a much larger monster somewhere deeper in the forest, and it sounds big. He's about to retreat and call for reinforcements, but then he hears a child's voice crying out, being attacked by the monster. There's no time to get help by the time he comes back. It might be too late, so instead, he rushes ahead to deal with the situation himself. When he arrives, he finds Kufa, the red-haired kid cornered against a tree by a hobgoblin. Kufa is badly injured, so Errol has to act fast, but he can't rush in recklessly, since the hobgoblin is still a serious threat. Errol waits patiently as the monster closes in. When it's just about to finish Kufa off, Errol sees an opening and strikes with a twin blade slash, killing the beast instantly. Kufa is still gravely wounded, so Errol shares some of his standard holy water with him to help him recover. Kufa feels much better and thanks Errol for sharing his holy water. But now, with the danger gone, he wants to know how the hell Errol managed to do that, since Twin Slash is a highly complex move that can only be performed through a special skill. Errol admits it's definitely complicated, but all he needed to do was figure out the patterns and timing, so he was able to replicate it quite easily. In fact, he should be thanking the redhead, because it was only by watching him repeatedly use the skill that Errol managed to figure out how to execute the technique himself. Kufa can hardly believe it. But even if Errol was able to mimic the technique without using a skill, he's still convinced his ability-based attack must be stronger. So he challenges Errol to another training match right there on the spot. The two face off again, and as expected, Errol perfectly matches Kufa's twin slash. But not only that, he goes even further and lands a third strike, catching Kufa off guard and knocking him down. No wonder it's called a double slash. If you can chain 3 or more strikes in the same rhythm, it's technically possible. And since Errol isn't relying on a skill to perform the move, there's no limit to how many times he can swing. Kufa is left stunned, realizing Errol is simply better than him. And Errol walks away, confident he's proven his superiority. A few days later, Errol is having dinner with his family, when Farah mentions that Evan's son decided to head to Brescia, the city of swords, to train for some reason. Errol immediately figures he's probably the reason the redhead decided to suddenly leave town to train. But the city of swords sounds interesting anyway, so he starts thinking about going there himself. A few years later, Errol finally boards a carriage bound for Brescia. In the same carriage, he meets a man and a woman who are also heading there. The man is a barbarian, and the woman is a dual-blade swordswoman. Errol suggests the man team up with her, but he immediately refuses because he's a total red pill type. He hates working with women, especially ones who fight wearing such revealing outfits. The woman gets offended and tells him her class focuses on speed and evasion, so there's no reason for her to wear heavy armor. Besides, the dress she wears actually helps, since most of her opponents get too distracted staring at her chest to fight properly. The two are just about to start a heated argument over it, but suddenly, the coachman interrupts them, saying that since they both have such incredible advanced classes, he'd really appreciate it if they could use those classes right now because they're in trouble. The two look ahead and realize the road is blocked by a massive horde of orcs, and there's no way around them. The barbarian immediately starts panicking. It would take an entire party to handle a horde that size. He knows full well he doesn't have what it takes to face them alone, so he shoves the defenseless mother and child back into the carriage and bolts. The swordswoman runs too, since she has no intention of risking her life for strangers, so it looks like everyone else in the carriage is doomed. Or at least that's what would have happened if our hero wasn't there. Errol charges straight into the horde, cutting them down one after another. The coachman is stunned because Errol just used Quick Step, a highly versatile skill, but one that's completely useless when you're surrounded. So he wonders what exactly Errol plans to do next. As the orcs close in, Errol starts spinning, unleashing a series of quick, precise slashes. The coachman can't believe what he's seeing. Errol is clearly using sword dance. But that's an exclusive ability of the Sword Princess class, and that class can only be obtained by women. Moments later, Errol drives his blade straight into the Orc King's skull, instantly ending the battle. Everyone else is left speechless and deeply grateful for his hard work. When he comes back, a boy in the carriage asks Errol what his class is, since his skills are unbelievable, but everyone is shocked to learn that he doesn't have one. 5 years earlier, when Errol first learned how to perform the twin blade technique, his mother had a hard time believing what she saw. She had been completely convinced that Errol was doomed to live as a bum forever, since he had no class. But he explained that he's able to naturally learn abilities through practice and hard work. So he asked her if she'd be willing to teach him a few techniques so he could learn them too. And after that, he wanted to head to Brescia to train for a while. However, his mother barely even listened, too overjoyed by the fact that her son wasn't a total failure after all. She ran inside to tell everyone the good news. Back in the present, the carriage finally arrives at the gates of Brescia, so the coachman wakes Errol up and tells him they've reached their destination. The city is packed with swordsmen and other advanced class adventurers, so Errol knows he could learn a lot here. Before leaving, though, he asks the coachman if he also has an advanced class. The coachman tries to dodge the question, saying he's just a driver. But an ordinary driver wouldn't have been able to identify Errol's sword techniques so precisely, so clearly there's something more to him. Eventually, the coachman admits that he's actually a holy knight, but he sometimes works as a coachman to take a break from all the constant fighting. So, thinking back, maybe they weren't as screwed against that orc horde as they thought, since this holy knight could have just used his skills and wiped them all out himself. Anyway, realizing it's Errol's first time in a big city, the coachman advises him to join a guild as soon as possible. Most swordsmen there make a living off the prize money from arena battles, and you can't participate in tournaments without being part of a guild. Still, he warns Errol to be careful which guild he joins, since some of them have unpleasant people. After the coachman leaves, Errol walks into the city, looking for a guild to join. Many of them seem to be recruiting, but he wants to make sure he picks the right one. Suddenly, a blonde girl sneaks up behind him, trying to bump into him on purpose, so she'll have an excuse to start a conversation. But Errol's too sharp for that, and she ends up face first on the ground. She can't believe he dodged her without even looking. But that only means he must be really skilled. So she gets up and tells him she has an offer for him. Basically, she asks Errol to join her guild, handing him a sign-up contract to fill out. But he immediately says he's not interested. Sure, he wants to join a guild, but she's using such desperate tactics that her guild must be terrible. And honestly, I've got a friend named Jean who wouldn't even listen to a word she said. He'd just sign up immediately because she's blonde, and that'd be that. But unlike my friend, Errol is completely level-headed, and he was right about the girls' guild. Still, she insists that he join her, even offering to go out with him if he agrees. but Errol tells her she's as boring as his sister, so he's not interested in going out with her at all. He then gets ready to leave, but before doing so, asks if she could at least point him to a good guild. The girl can't believe Errol is asking for advice after calling her boring, but she's a nice person, so she tells him that the best guild around is the Black Blade Guild, and that its building is just up ahead. Errol follows her directions and finally finds the Black Blade Guild office, but there's a long line of people wanting to register, so he'll have to wait a while. When it's finally his turn, the clerk says he'll need to apply for an aptitude test, and to do that, he must have an advanced class. However, when Errol says he doesn't have a class, the clerk practically explodes and tells him to leave the line, saying he'll never be allowed to take the test as a classless loser. Errol asks if they could make an exception just this once, since he's sure he could pass the test if given the chance, but the clerk says rules are rules, so Errol is forced to leave. He tries to register at every guild in the city, but unfortunately, his advanced skill of lying to recruiters doesn't work here, since they check his card and discover he has no class, so everyone rejects him. Of course, no guild would accept Errol like this, but then he remembers that his mother wrote him a recommendation letter before he left. She said that if he took it to her former guild, they'd definitely let him join, so Errol decides to start looking for the place. At that moment, the blonde girl from before approaches him again. Her name is Lilia, and she asks if he's willing to join her guild now, but Errol has absolutely no interest in working with her. She begs him to reconsider, since her guild is about to be dissolved for not having enough members, but Errol says that's not his problem. Lilia is getting really desperate now, so she kneels on the ground and starts begging Errol to join her. She even offers to lick the dirt off his boots if he agrees, but when she looks up, Errol is already gone. The crowd is laughing at the pitiful scene. It's honestly painful to watch. Errol's been walking for quite a while, so he should be close to his mother's old guild, but he's not sure which building it is. At that moment, Lilia appears again. She's persistent and asks Errol to at least visit her guild, since it's really close by. In fact, she can even see it from there, so she points to the building and Errol is surprised because it actually looks really nice. He asks why she's so desperate to recruit new members if the guild looks so well established. She explains that her guild used to be really famous, but a lot has happened, and now it's just a shadow of what it once was. In fact, they're practically the weakest of all guilds right now, but she promises Errol that the Dragonfang Guild will rise to the top again. Errol is shocked to learn that Lilia's guild is called Dragonfang, because that's actually the name of his mother's old guild, so that's quite a coincidence. He doesn't object anymore after hearing her offer, so he follows her inside. She takes him to the waiting room so they can talk things over, but her father is there, and the place is a complete mess at the moment. He notices that Lilia brought another rookie to register, but tells Errol not to waste his time there, since the guild is completely done for. He leaves before Lilia can say anything, and she explains to Errol that her father used to be one of the best swordsmen in Brescia, but he hasn't been the same since the day he lost his arm. She's sure that seeing the guild leader in such a pitiful state must have made Errol lose faith in Dragonfang, but to her surprise, Errol says he'd still like to join them. She asks if he's sure he really wants to, but it's not like any other guild would accept him anyway, so this is his only option. That's enough for Lilia, so she grabs a registration contract and hands it to Errol to sign. After that, Errol officially becomes a member of Dragonfang, but Lilia realizes she never asked what his class was, so she looks at the form, and to her surprise, he wrote classless. At first, she thinks Errol must be joking, so she asks him to take it a bit more seriously, but he says he's not kidding and even shows his ID as proof. Lilia goes silent after realizing that Errol really doesn't have a class. Then she threatens to beat him up unless he immediately cancels the contract. Errol calmly asks why, but it's common sense that no guild would ever want to accept someone classless among its members. She was so happy to finally have found a new recruit for the guild, but if Errol really has no class, he'd be useless in the tournament, so what is she supposed to do now? At that moment, another guild member named Lena walks in by chance, and Lilia runs to her crying about how the new recruit who just joined has no class. But as soon as Lena hears the word classless, she knows exactly who Lilia must be talking about. She asks Errol what he's doing there, but Errol says he doesn't need to explain himself to a stranger. Lena can't believe that Errol doesn't remember her after all the time they spent training together in the village, but he insists he's never seen her before, since he'd definitely remember training with someone as beautiful as her. Lena gets flustered when Errol calls her beautiful, but then he starts to recall training with someone who had the same red hair as her. That person was the son of Captain Evans, but Lena tells Errol that Evans only ever had one daughter, and she's that daughter. That's when he realizes she's the one he used to train with back then. And here comes the plot twist. Everyone thought she was a boy, but she was actually a girl all along. He apologizes for not recognizing her, But to be fair, she looks completely different now. As he says that, he makes direct eye contact with her, and she explains that she's been training here for 5 years just to make sure she never loses to Errol again. Now that he's here, she challenges him to a friendly match to show how much she's improved. Errol is always ready for a fight, so the two head to the training hall. Once the match starts, the redhead launches a strike with 2 blades. Errol tries to counterattack with a dual slash, but their blows clash and Lena's attack still manages to hit him. He doesn't understand what just happened. So Lena explains that even though she can copy his technique, hers has become much stronger thanks to her training. Her strikes are at least 5 times more powerful than his. Errol is impressed by how much Lena has grown, but if strength is her main advantage, all he has to do is avoid getting hit. Lena lunges in to attack again, but as she strikes, Errol dodges so quickly that he leaves behind and after him. The man's moving like the Flash. She recognizes it immediately. It's the supreme shadow sword technique, and she can't believe Errol actually managed to learn something like that on his own. Basically, he's just learned to move insanely fast, Flash level fast. At this point, there's no way Lena can touch Errol, and soon after, he knocks her out by countering one of her blows and redirecting the force back at her. Errol is clearly the winner of the duel, and the redhead tries to act like it doesn't bother her, but she starts crying the moment she leaves the room. She just can't believe Errol is still stronger than her. Even after training non-stop for 5 years, Errol and Lilia decide to give Lena some time to cool off, so they return to the meeting room. Once there, Errol asks Lilia for more details about the guild's current situation. In short, she explains that the guild is drowning in debt, and they need to win the next tournament to earn enough money to pay it off. But at least 3 members are required to participate, and that's why she was so desperate to find someone new to join. Given the circumstances, Errol wonders why Lena chose to stay in the guild for so long. Lilia explains that when the redhead first arrived in the city, all the major guilds rejected her because they didn't want to train a child, but Lilia's father took her in despite her age, and she's been a loyal member of Dragonfang ever since. Anyway, regarding the guild's current situation, Errol doesn't think they should worry too much. Everything will be fine as long as they win the tournament. It's true that they'll have to fight 5-member teams with only 3 people, but he likes a good challenge. The next morning, Errol wakes up and meets with Lena and Lilia to discuss the guild's next steps. Now that everyone's there, Lilia proudly announces that Dragonfang has finally secured 3 members enough to participate in the team battle. So, this weekend, they'll be entering the guild competition. She goes on to explain that the tournament is structured as a knockout competition, 1-on-1 rounds, and that each team can have a maximum of 5 members. Lena looks a little worried, since they'll be competing with only 3. But Lilia assures them it shouldn't be too hard, since both she and Lena are ranked as B rank. As long as they don't face anyone classified as a rank, everything should go fine. This is the first time Errol has heard of the ranking system, so Lilia gives him a quick explanation. There are 4 total ranks that define a swordsman's individual strength. Out of the 500 swordsmen in Brestry, only 20 are classified as a rank, while Lena and Lilia are both B rank. Errol hasn't been classified yet, but since he managed to defeat Lena, Lilia assumes he's at least B rank too. But come on, he's the hero of our story, you already know he's gonna be S rank. Maybe even SS+, in no time. Anyway, as long as they don't get unlucky with the match pairings, they've got a solid chance of winning. Speaking of that, the tournament brackets should already be posted on the bulletin board, so Lilia says she'll go check them right away at the Coliseum. Meanwhile, the redhead goes off to train while Lilia is gone, but before she can leave, Errol calls her back because he has a favor to ask. Since she's a powerful swordswoman, he asks if she has any other abilities besides raw strength. She replies that she does a skill called Courage, which basically makes her divine protection last longer than usual. Errol thinks about it seriously and realizes that this ability could be an incredible asset in battle, so he steps closer to Lena and asks her to hit him repeatedly. Lena blushes and asks if they can do something a little more normal, since Errol's request sounds really weird. But he insists she's misunderstanding the reason he wants her to hit him is because he believes her courage skill is essentially a technique that boosts endurance. So the best way to replicate it is by learning to take hits without using divine protection. Lena is shocked and calls him crazy. Everyone knows that abilities are divine blessings that depend on one's class, but Errol reminds her that she heard him recreate the dual blade and shadow sword techniques, so there's no reason he can't copy Courage too. To prove his point, he asks Lena to hand him her sword for a moment. She hesitantly agrees, but is confused. Since her weapon was custom-made to be 5 times heavier than a normal sword, it shouldn't even be possible for him to wield it without the brute strength ability. However, Errol proves her wrong by unsheathing the blade and swinging it effortlessly. She asks how that's even possible, and Errol explains that while brute strength makes someone stronger than normal, dedicated training can reach the same result, and he's been training non-stop for years. The redhead admits she was wrong and agrees to help him train, but warns him that if he wants her to hit him, she won't hold back, so he better not complain later. A few minutes later, Lilia bursts into the house with terrible news. She just checked the tournament brackets in Brescia, and of all the teams they could have faced, the organizers matched them against the Black Blade Guild, whose members include at least 8 A-rank fighters. Even so, Lilia stays confident that she and the others can still pull through. But right after finishing her motivational speech, she notices that Lena has been beating the crap out of Errol for a while now. Lena defends herself, saying it's his own fault since he asked for it. Despite his severe injuries, Errol doesn't seem bothered at all. He just gets up and casually asks what's for lunch. Finally, the day of the guild tournament arrives. As soon as the group shows up for their match, they overhear 2 guys nearby talking about Dragonfang's bad luck out of all the possible opponents. They ended up facing the Black Blade. They remember how Dragonfang used to be one of the best guilds, but now they're nothing but underdog. The 2 men even say they wouldn't dare bet money on them, so they put all their money on Black Blade. Lilia gets offended that anyone would assume Dragonfang is just going to lose, so she starts walking toward them to teach them a lesson, but the redhead holds her back, saying it's not worth getting into trouble over that. Errol doesn't really care whether people believe they'll win or not, but he's surprised to learn that betting on matches is allowed. Lena explains that all Colosseum battles can be wagered on, and given the current situation, the odds for their team are 20-1. Lilia gets angry because that means no one expects them to win, but she sees an opportunity in it after all. If they do win, the profit will be huge. If they lose, the guild will be bankrupt anyway, so she decides to take another loan, using the guild building as collateral, just so she can bet everything on their own fight. Errol finally understands how Dragonfang managed to get into so much debt, and at that moment Lilia hears a man laughing behind her. She turns around, and to her annoyance, finds George, the master of the Black Blade Guild, or Lamina Nigra. He's standing there with a smug grin, and she asks what he wants. George replies that he's just there to wish them luck, since it pains him to see his former rival guild going through such hard times. He even heard that they were desperate enough to accept a classless loser as a member. Lilia snaps back that it's none of his business, but George explains that he personally arranged for their guilds to face each other in the tournament, so of course, he wants to know who's on Dragonfang's lineup. Lilia can't believe he manipulated the matchups just to fight Dragonfang, but George says he's actually doing them a favor. Fighting against a popular guild like Black Blade brought massive attention to the tournament. That means if Dragonfang somehow wins, they'll earn a fortune, but only if they pull off a miracle victory against Black Blade's A-rank fighters. Not long after, it's time for the main event of the day. Errol and the others enter the arena and check the Black Blade lineup. Errol is surprised to see that the guild master himself isn't competing, even though he seemed personally eager to crush them. He wonders if George is going easy on them, but Lilia and Lena point out that the roster is packed with Black Blade's strongest A-rank members. It's going to be an incredibly tough battle. Hearing that actually excites Errol, since it means he'll get to see plenty of new abilities. But the blonde reminds him that Dragonfang's future is on the line, so he better take this seriously. As the match officially begins, Loa Kuchera introduces the first Black Blade fighter, a fencer named Dio. When she starts announcing Dragonfang's fighter, she hesitates for a moment. According to the list, it's someone named Errol, who has no class. That has to be a mistake, right? The crowd starts murmuring in shock, surprised that a classless nobody dared to enter the tournament. Dio feels personally insulted to have to fight someone like that. The moment the match starts, Dio uses Blink Dash to close the distance and stab Errol in the chest, but to his shock, the attack goes straight through a residual afterimage, a result of Errol's Shadow Sword technique. He can't understand how Errol can use such a skill without having a class, but quickly adapts and begins analyzing a way to counter those afterimages. However, he makes a fatal mistake assuming Errol is limited to only 3 clones. After destroying the 3 illusions, Dio lowers his guard, and that's when the real Errol appears, landing the final strike. Dio collapses unconscious. The crowd goes absolutely wild over the unexpected twist. Both Lilia and Lena believed Errol could win, but neither imagined he'd do it so effortlessly. While everyone else is celebrating, Errol looks more frustrated than happy. He didn't fully understand how Dio's thrusting technique worked, and plans to study it later. His next opponent is a dual swordsman, but when the guy attacks, Errol easily blocks the initial strike and counterattacks with a double slash, taking him down instantly and securing another victory. The third opponent is a barbarian, and since Errol has only faced swordsmen so far, the man tries to surprise him with a kick, but he's not fast enough. Errol moves behind him and slashes his neck, ending the fight cleanly and precisely. Lena can hardly believe that Errol just defeated 3 A-rank fighters on his own, while Lilia is completely ecstatic. If things keep going this way, Errol could win all 5 matches by himself. The The redhead jokes that it seems like Lilia didn't even want to fight in the tournament, and Lilia admits it's true. She knows that if she were in Errol's place, she would have been defeated in under a minute. There's no way she could handle a duel against an A-rank opponent, which is why she's putting all her energy into cheering for him, because honestly, her life literally depends on it. In the next match, Errol faces a shield bearer and struggles to break through his defenses, but still manages to gain the upper hand. Frustrated, the shield bearer accuses Errol of lying about not having a class after all. There's no way someone without a class could defeat 3 A-rank warriors so easily. Errol calmly replies that his victories are the result of his own effort and dedication. The opponent laughs and says that effort can never surpass the power of a class, leading to the classic debate between talent and hard work. Errol counters with a smirk, saying that if that were true, his opponent wouldn't be getting beaten up by a classless teenager. The shield bearer charges and tries to use his shield bash ability to knock Errol down, but Errol anticipates it and counters with a kick that sends the shield flying from the man's hand. The shield bearer looks shocked, saying he recognizes that kick. Errol replies that it's probably because he copied it from the barbarian he fought in the previous round, though he still hasn't mastered it completely. As he speaks, Errol adjusts his stance and lands another kick, hitting the shield bearer on the side. The man is baffled. There's no way someone could learn such a skill just by watching. Errol admits that some abilities are indeed too complex and require long practice to master, but explains that some of the more basic ones can be learned simply by observing. To demonstrate, he walks over, picks up the man's fallen shield, and with a single motion, knocks him out using the shield bearer's own signature move. This marks Errol's 4th victory, and it's now clear that he's incredibly strong, but the crowd begins to doubt that he's truly classless. Many think he's faking it and start shouting for his disqualification. Because of the public outrage, the organizers contact the Guild Association to obtain a copy of Errol's original class assessment. The announcer asks Errol if he agrees to have his personal information shared publicly, and he calmly says yes if it'll help calm everyone down. The evaluation card is displayed for all to see, and the document clearly confirms that he truly has no class. The audience falls silent for a moment before finally accepting it. Amid the shock, Lilia comments that if she had known Errol was that strong, she would have pawned everything she could, even more of her father's treasures, just to bet on him. Lena sighs, worried about Lilia's gambling addiction, but admits that Errol's strength is beyond anything she could have imagined. The final Black Blade combatant is called to the stage. Errol immediately senses that this man is different. There's something in the way he holds his sword that makes him seem dangerously superior to all the others. His name is Masamune. He watches Errol closely and smiles, impressed that the young man instinctively kept his distance. Masamune had planned to lure him into range of his finishing strike and end the fight instantly. But when Errol hears the words, "finishing strike," he decides to take the risk. He steps forward, closing the distance step by step. The moment he's close enough, Masamune draws his blade and delivers an incredibly fast slash, so fast the audience can barely follow it. For a second, everyone thinks the blade went straight through Errol's neck, but his body flickers into an afterimage. Before Masamune can react, Errol is already behind him. Errol calmly explains that while Masamune is incredibly fast, he was trained by someone even faster, his own mother. His reaction speed is on another level. Deciding to end the match, Errol raises his sword and unleashes his ultimate technique, the one he learned from Fora, his mother called Piercing Tempest, a flurry of rapid thrusts forming a whirlwind of blades that strike Masamune all at once. When the attack ends, Masamune collapses unconscious, and Errol is declared the winner. Lena and Lilia are stunned. They've won the tournament without even having to fight. As Errol steps down from the stage, Lilia runs up and leaps into a huge hug, but he instantly steps back, an instinct born from years of surprise hugs from his own sister. Then he turns and sees Lena, who instinctively opens her arms too, but quickly realizes what she's doing, blushes, and turns away, apologizing for getting carried away. Errol laughs and says that he actually wouldn't have minded the hug, but he'd have preferred if she took off the armor first, so he could appreciate the softness better. Meanwhile, from the stands, George watches Errol and the others celebrating their victory, and with eyes full of resentment, he swears that Errol will pay the price for this defeat. That night, everyone returns to the guild to celebrate Errol's victory, and Lilia is still trying to convince him to marry her, so she can enjoy his talent for the rest of her life. But Errol says that if he were to marry anyone, it would be Lena. Lena immediately stands up from her seat, telling Errol to stop teasing her, because there's no way he's being serious. Errol asks why she thinks he's joking, and she explains that most men mistake her for the kind of person who only cares about wielding a sword. Errol admits that he made that same mistake when they first met. She's sure Errol wouldn't want to marry someone lacking feminine charm like her, but at that moment, Errol's eyes are clearly focused on two very charming and attractive things. Anyway, Lena says she's focused on becoming the greatest swordswoman in the world and has no time to waste on romance. Lilia feels relieved hearing that it means she won't have competition for Errol's attention. She starts stroking Errol's leg and offers to give him a special massage to thank him for all his hard work today, but Errol declines and asks Lena to do it instead. However, instead of a normal massage, he says he wants her to start hitting him with her sword just like last time. The redhead asks if he's sure about that, since she's starting to feel bad for hitting him so much, but he insists that it's the only way to learn the courage skill. Honestly, it seems like he's just using that as an excuse. Maybe he just enjoys getting beaten up by a beautiful woman. Lena is the most skilled and confident person he knows, so she's the only one he could ask for something like that. And yeah, that's a pretty convenient excuse. At that moment, Lena's father appears. He comes down the stairs to see all the commotion. At first, he assumes the redhead is venting her frustration on Errol after losing the afternoon tournament. But to his surprise, Lena tells him that they actually won the match against the Black Blade and earned enough money to pay off the debt and keep the guild running. Her father can't believe it and asks if the Black Blade made a mistake and sent a bunch of rookies to fight them. But she explains that they sent their best fighters, and Errol defeated them all by himself. Lena's father is shocked. He never thought Errol was that strong. Still, he refuses to show any optimism and says it's only a matter of time before Errol abandons them for a better guild. Lena insists that won't happen because she plans to marry Errol, but Errol immediately cuts in, saying he never agreed to any marriage proposal. Lena's father keeps going on about how pointless it is to try to save the guild, but Errol is getting tired of all the negativity. He tells him to shut up, because at least Lena is trying to do something with her life, unlike her father, who's become nothing but a sorry excuse of a man. He's always complaining about only having one arm. Errol tells him he only needs one hand to hold a sword, and that statement really pisses the old man off. He grabs Errol by the collar and growls that he has no idea what he's talking about, since all his dual sword techniques are useless with just one hand. But as someone who had to learn how to fight without any special abilities, Errol tells him simply to get better. Lena's father has no response to that, so he lets Errol go and storms out of the training hall in anger. Lena apologizes for her father's behavior and thanks Errol for standing up to him. She believes his words might have had some effect. The redhead hopes it'll inspire him to start training again, since she knows deep down he's still an incredible person. Errol says he'd love to see him training, since there are plenty of dual sword techniques he'd like to learn. Since Errol seems genuinely eager to learn new abilities, Lena suggests taking a trip to the dungeon beneath the city. She explains it's a place full of traps and monsters, and Errol gets excited to check it out. Lena wants to go too, since she needs real combat experience to prepare for the Sword God tournament. Errol asks what that tournament is, and she explains it's similar to the one they just fought in, but this one determines the strongest swordsman in the entire city, so it's a big deal. Lilia assumes Errol will want to join, so she grabs a registration form and tells him to sign it. Errol looks at the paper and tears it up, because Lilia was trying to trick him into signing a marriage certificate. Lilia tries to pretend it was just a harmless joke, but Errol doesn't let it slide. He puts her in an arm lock and refuses to let go until she apologizes. Meanwhile, a woman dressed in a dark robe spies on them through a crystal ball. Following George's orders, he still holds a grudge. He approaches and asks if she has discovered where they are going. She reports that apparently they will soon head to the dungeon, which George finds perfect, since no one would suspect them if an unfortunate accident occurred while the kids were there. The next morning, Lilia sneaks into Errol's room wearing a nightgown. She's trying to seduce him, but Errol is red pill and doesn't even consider it. He's dealt with similar situations with his sister so many times that he can immediately tell when someone is invading his personal space. He wakes up and grabs Lilia by the head with all his strength. Lilia starts begging for mercy, and Errol lets go, but he doesn't want to take any chances, so he takes a bedsheet and ties her to the bed. Then he heads to Lena's room to ask for help dealing with Lilia. He knocks on the door and hears Lena tell him to come in, but when he enters, he finds her fast asleep in bed. She tends to talk a lot in her sleep and appears to be imagining Errol's voice as if it were her father's, and she looks incredibly cute in that moment, so he joins in the playful mood and gives her a gentle pat on the head. Later that day, the group heads to the dungeon, and Errol is surprised by its appearance, expecting something more like a cave entrance. He is also shocked by the number of people there. But Lena explains that it's because the Sword God tournament is approaching, and everyone wants to practice as much as possible before the big day. When they arrive inside, Lilia shows Errol the teleportation circle, and explains that it allows people to instantly teleport to any floor they have visited before. Since Errol has never been in a dungeon, he will have to descend from floor 1. Lilia reassures him not to worry, as she will show the fastest route to the lower floors. While she guides him, the redhead can go do whatever she wants elsewhere. Lena says she also wants to go, but Lilia says there's no need for Errol to have 2 guides, as it would be an inefficient use of her time. She begins leading Errol to the entrance, but mentions how excited she is to have fun with him when they're alone. Errol stops immediately and tells Lena to come with him too. Later, the group faces their first real challenge, living armor. Errol attacks first, crossing swords with one of the armors, impressed by its speed for an armor, but he's even faster and easily cuts off its head. To Errol's surprise, the armor continues to move even after being decapitated. Lena explains that the armor is empty and uses dungeon magic to move, so it has no real weak points. Errol concludes that the best way to stop it is to cut its legs, so he runs and does exactly that. Lena finishes off her own armor shortly after, and the room is clear for now. But sooner or later, the armor will begin regenerating. Lilia approaches, commenting on how difficult the fight was, but Errol points out that she literally did nothing to help. Lilia defends herself, saying it's not her fault, since the 2 of them destroyed all the armors before she even had a chance. Thinking about it, Errol has literally never seen Lilia fight, so he doesn't even know her class. Lilia draws her sword and tells him she's a Miss Grimmist, and if he wants to learn any of her abilities, she'd be happy to teach him. A Miss Grimmist is technically just an inferior version of her mother's Sword Princess class, so Errol says there's nothing Lilia can teach him. After that remark, the group starts heading toward the room's exit, but suddenly they encounter a boy who appears seriously injured. He tells them he fell into a trap after entering a new dungeon, and his teammates are still trapped in that room. He needs help to rescue them. Lena immediately agrees to help, but Lilia tells him to wait a moment. It's not because she thinks the boy is suspicious, but because she wants to be paid first. She has a rule of never doing anything for free, so she tells the boy to take out the scorpion from his pocket if he wants to save his friends. Reluctantly, he complies, and now Lilia is fully willing to help him. However, while the others agree to this, Errol finds the whole situation suspicious because the guy seems too agile for someone with so much blood in his body. Lilia ignores this, saying that not everyone is as strong as Errol, so the guy probably just took a few unlucky hits while fleeing. Errol still has his doubts, since if the guy had lost as much blood as he claims, he wouldn't be able to stand, much less walk. He's certain the guy's injuries are fake. He isn't sure what kind of trap the guy is planning, but he thinks it will be a good challenge, so he decides to help. The guy leads them to the entrance of a secret room, where they find a pool of blood in the middle, but no sign of the missing friends. Lena wonders if they arrived too late, but Lilia is far more concerned about a random coin she sees on the floor, so she rushes to grab it. She inadvertently activates a teleportation circle, and the guy starts laughing, saying his job is done since he managed to lure the group into the trap. But he didn't realize he was also inside the circle and ends up being caught as well. A moment later, the group finds themselves on a different floor, and neither Lena nor Lilia recognize the place. So this must be one of the dungeon's deeper levels. They hear the guy who tricked them complaining that it's unfair that he got caught in the trap too. Lilia is about to kick him in revenge, but accidentally sends her coin flying into the middle of the room, summoning a metal knight. The guy looks terrified because he was paid to trick them into a teleportation trap that would send them to the dungeon's depths, where they would face the sword god. And right there in front of them stands the sword god in question. Lilia and Lena think the guy is bluffing since sword god classes are just a myth. But a moment later, the knight draws his sword and unleashes a strike that almost decapitates the boy. The knight then targets Errol and hurls him against a device with great force. But thanks to his resistance training with the redhead, Errol withstands it with minimal damage. He counters the knight, but the knight uses an advanced version of the divine step to evade. Errol is sure this is the real sword god, but instead of worrying, he sees it as a perfect opportunity to give his all and test his new abilities. He uses divine step to close the distance and cross swords with the knight. The knight activates a skill called divine presence, which normally restricts the movement of everyone in the area. But Errol isn't affected because he spent so much time training with his mother to learn how to counter it. Back then, he could barely stand, but now he can jump out of the knight's attack and cut him into pieces with his infinite strike. Now that the battle is over, Errol drinks some holy water to recover. While resting, the two girls ask how he knew about the sword god's abilities. He explains that he learned from his mother. Although she usually limits herself to sword princess moves, she is actually a sword goddess. This seems hard to believe, but Lena knows Errol wouldn't lie about something like that, so she trusts him. She still doesn't understand why his mother would pretend to be a sword princess. He says she simply didn't want all the attention it would bring, so she kept that part a secret. Back on the surface, Roger, Lilia's father, discovers the trap George set and is heartbroken, thinking his daughter is dead. But to both of their surprise, Errol and the others arrive unharmed. Roger is relieved that Lilia is safe, and George can't believe how they survived the sword god. Lilia smiles, saying that Errol defeated him easily. But that's not all, they even got the boy to confess that George was behind the entire trap. George begins to panic a little at being caught, but then remembers there are no laws in dungeons, so he can't be punished for any crime committed there. He leaves confidently, saying there's nothing they can do about it. But as soon as he gets home, he starts destroying his room in disbelief that a boy like Errol could be so much better than him. Suddenly, a sword in his room begins to speak to him, promising to help him achieve his goals if he frees it. The next day, the two girls are sitting in the living room. Lilia looks very worried because the preliminary pairings for the tournament have been announced, and she has just discovered that she will have to face Errol, so now she has no chance of reaching the finals. Errol tells her not to feel too bad since her chances of winning the tournament with her current skill level were quite small anyway, but that doesn't make her feel any better. In fact, it only makes her feel worse. Fortunately for the redhead, she isn't in Errol's bracket in the preliminaries, but she will still have to face many tough opponents, so she'll need to give her best if she wants to get past the preliminaries this year. Lilia also plans to give her best, even knowing she has no chance of beating Errol, so she says she'll descend into the dungeon again to train today. She asks Errol to accompany her because she wants him there to protect her if anything bad happened. However, he isn't too keen on diving back into the dungeon. At that moment, Lilia's father steps out to see what's happening, and after learning that Lilia plans to enter the dungeon again, he warns her to be careful, since there's no way to know what George might scheme next, and he doesn't want to lose his beloved daughter. Lilia realizes her father is genuinely worried about her, so she promises to stay alert, which is a huge relief to him. Errol is surprised by Roger's sudden change in behavior, but after nearly losing his daughter to George's cruelty, he realized he can't allow himself to remain a failure, so even having lost an arm, he decides to start training again. Sometime later, the day of the Sword God Cup preliminaries finally arrives. A large crowd gathers to watch all the swordsmen face off, and Lilia ends up losing her first match against a random opponent despite all her training. She's pretty upset about it. Errol tries to console her, saying that her failure was inevitable, so there's no need to blame herself. But again, this doesn't make her feel any better. I'm starting to feel sorry for her. Errol has won all his matches so far, so the next match in this bracket will be the grand final. Even though Lilia is aware of how strong she is, she warns him to keep his guard up, as the woman he will face has many unique abilities. Errol wonders what Lilia means by unique abilities, since he thought he had seen practically all the dungeon skills. However, Lilia explains that so far Errol has only encountered sword-based abilities. But this woman has the skill of a magic swordsman, meaning she can enchant her blade with magic while fighting. Errol is surprised that there are no rules against using magic, since this is a sword fighting tournament, but on the other hand, it doesn't bother him much. He steps onto the stage, and the first thing the girl says is that magic swordsmen are allowed in the tournament, so she doesn't want to hear any excuses about magic being against the rules after she wins. Errol says he's always ready to face a good challenge, and the match begins. The girl launches fireballs, forcing Errol to jump around the ring to dodge them all. He tries to attack her up close, but she defends herself and launches another fireball point blank, forcing Errol to retreat. By this point, Errol already has a good understanding of what the girl is capable of and admits that it must be very convenient to be able to attack effectively at both long and short range. But in the end, he says her skill is only mid-level, as she doesn't truly master either magic or swordsmanship, she's just repeating attacks. The girl is quite offended, telling Errol he won't say that after she uses her ultimate technique on him. She then uses magic to envelop her sword in flames, which catches Errol's attention since it's a rare sight. She begins launching waves of fire at him, and he is genuinely impressed, as the movement of the flames makes it hard to tell where the attacks are coming from. He says that this will be a spectacular skill once she masters it, but for now it's still basic enough that he barely needs to move to dodge the flames. If her sword skill were at least as good as Lilia's, he would really have difficulty handling the fire skill, but she only came hoping to win the competition with raw firepower, so defeating her won't be hard. The girl angrily declares that she won't be defeated by a classless loser, but in the next moment, Errol uses his twin blades strike to extinguish the flames on her sword. He immediately runs to knock her down, and with that, Errol is declared the winner of this preliminary session. But the only thing on his mind now is whether there's any special training he can do to learn to use magic as well. A few days later, Lilia wakes her father from a nap and tells him that she just discovered she'll have to face Errol, but Rod, her father, says he won't go. Lilia starts pulling him by his remaining arm, begging him him to get up. Since her guild has already registered seats, he refuses to attend the tournament. Lilia asks if he's worried about running into George there, but he says that's not it. He explains that a few days ago he started training again and realized how rusty he had become. Winning the Sword God tournament in his current state might even be a challenge for him. Hearing her father talk about winning the tournament as if it were the easiest thing really irritates Lilia, because she didn't even manage to qualify. She tells him she'll go to the arena today, whether he likes it or not, and drags him off the sofa so he can get dressed. Once Rod is ready, he and Lilia set off. Even though he had been complaining about not wanting to go to the tournament, Lilia knows he would have gone to watch in secret anyway, since he never misses the chance to see his guild members perform well. Rod can't even deny that. Meanwhile, at the arena, Lilia is fidgeting in her seat, very nervous about her match. Errol finally appears and asks if something's wrong, since he has never seen her so anxious before. Lilia says she can't help it, as this is the biggest tournament in the city, and to make matters worse, she won't find out who her opponent is until the start of the match, so she has no way of knowing what kind of fighter she'll face. At that moment, Loco announces to everyone that the first match of the day will be between last year's champion, George, the Sword Emperor, and Errol. Errol is surprised that he'll have to face George first, but he's always ready for a good fight, so he heads out to meet him. However, when George enters the arena, everyone is shocked to see that he has somehow found a way to look even more menacing than before. Errol senses a sinister energy radiating from him. Rod and Lilia are in the stands. Lilia wonders why George now looks like a monster, but her father immediately realizes something is very wrong. At that moment, he notices the sword in George's hand and shouts at Errol to stay away at all costs, because that blade contains a powerful demon sealed within it. The demon is surprised, as it didn't expect anyone to recognize the sword. Clearly, it has taken full control of George's body. Legend says that the blade the sword god used to kill the demon was cursed with immense rancor, so the demon's soul now resides inside it. But this sword was supposed to be sealed inside the royal vault, so Rod can't understand how George got his hands on it. The demon says it was only a matter of time before some foolish idiot released it in pursuit of power, and George was the one who did it. Now the demon, called Durgilda, plans to wreak havoc on the world. No one understands why he chose to wait patiently until the tournament began to appear. His only desire is to destroy the world. The Blade cannot believe Durgilda is truly alive, since history class taught that this demon had been summoned by an evil ritual in ancient times to burn the entire world, but everyone assumed it was just a myth. Everyone panics when they realize it's not a joke and starts running out of the arena. Durgilda delights in the screams of pure terror. However, before anyone can leave the stadium, the demon conjures a barrier, trapping everyone inside. No matter how hard they try, none of them can escape. Durgilda plans to take his time massacring them all, but then he notices Errol preparing to fight and finds it amusing that a brat like him is foolish enough to raise his sword instead of begging for mercy. Errol says he's confident he can win this fight. After all, a long time ago Durgilda was defeated by a sword god, so he's not invincible. Durgilda admits that it's true he was once defeated by a sword god, but based on George's memories, there is currently no living sword god to stop him. Errol tells Durgilda that he's wrong about two things. First, there is at least one living sword god at this time, and second, even if Errol isn't technically a sword god, he is still confident he can defeat him. Durgilda smiles, thinking Errol must be delirious, but that amusement quickly fades when Errol uses his divine step to close the distance, nearly decapitating the demon. Durgilda cannot believe what just happened, since only a sword god should have such an ability. He demands to know how Errol acquired it, but Errol isn't interested in talking at the moment. Errol then begins to attack him relentlessly, but Durgilda suddenly smiles upon realizing he is in the body of a sword emperor, making his attacks incredibly powerful. He jumps into the air and strikes a direct blow to Errol's shoulder, throwing him to the ground, but to the demon's shock. When the dust settles, Errol is perfectly fine. I think this is the result of training with the redhead. He cannot understand how the child managed to escape such a powerful attack. And Durgilda starts to get nervous because nothing he tries against Errol seems to actually work. At this pace, it will only be a matter of time before he is defeated. Soon after, Errol uses his Infinity Break ability to attack Durgilda hundreds of times in a single second. This is too much for the demon to endure, and as soon as he is finally defeated, Errol emerges victorious. George's body is completely unprotected, and Errol is confident that Durgilda should no longer be able to attack, so he begins to move away. Meanwhile, the demon is internally shouting every curse word he knows and doesn't know because he doesn't want to be sealed again. But he knows there is no way to defeat our hero. He concludes that the best course of action is to move as far away from Errol as possible. But to do that, he needs to find a new host whose body is fossilized enough to escape. He briefly considers going after Linnea, but Errol is too close to her, so he decides to aim for Hod. Suddenly, Errol notices the demon's sword flying from George's hand toward him. He jumps in front of Linnea to push her out of the way, but the sword rises and hits the stands. When the dust settles, Lilia is fine, but Durgilda is now holding the sword to Hod's neck and demands that Errol release him, or his wife will be killed. Errol responds bluntly that he never married Lilia, but Durgilda thinks he is bluffing because he has access to Hod's memories and clearly remembers every time Lilia said this to her father, who wanted to make Errol her husband. Suddenly, Errol no longer feels the urge to save Lilia, so he prepares to attack anyway. But Linnea tells him to stop because Lilia is still his friend. Errol then tells her that there is no real reason to worry, as he believes Durgilda will not be able to harm Lilia. Durgilda interprets this as a challenge, so he prepares to cut Lilia's throat to prove how cruel he is. But for some reason, his arms do not move. Hod is still conscious inside his body, and he cannot just stand by and watch his daughter be killed by his own hands. He begins to fight to expel Durgilda from his body. The demon desperately offers Hod the power to regain his former glory if he gives up his body. If this had happened a few days ago, Hod probably would have fallen into temptation. But thanks to Errol, he now knows that everything is possible through hard work, so he does not need the demon's power. Hod regains control of his body and throws the sword toward Errol, who cuts it into pieces, destroying Durgilda forever. But if breaking the sword is enough to get rid of him, why on earth did anyone think it was a good idea to keep it nearby, right? They could have just broken the devil of a sword earlier. And that brings us to the end of the first part of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And don't forget to comment below so we can know you're enjoying the content. Tell me if you want to see part 2 of this insane story. That's it. God bless. Thanks, and see you in the next video.